It went through, you know. So do you have any questions or comments before we begin our nonsense for 3, 4, 5 hours? Carol?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment that the Dante video for this week, I think it was my favorite one out of everything we've watched so far. It was so invitating to like watch his story, but at the same time connected not only to actually someone you can love, but like love for yourself and just for others in general.
Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it. It's best if you don't love anyone, though. Thank you. Just in case I find out that you have, I can always change your grade from a pass to no pass or to a fail. Does that make sense? Okay. We'll talk about that later. Anyone else? Yeah.
I spoke with a pastor. He said
I'm sorry, was he Catholic?
Baptist.
Well, they're all the same. Okay.
Yeah. He said something about speaking in tongues. What is he referring to?
He's crazy.
Okay.
Anyone else? Yeah. Dante was a good man. But you're talking about a time where religion was very important, culture was intact. He had fallen in love with an angel. And it's something we'll talk about tonight as we get into Judaism, because the truth is, whatever you touch, eventually, it'll just die. You have a boyfriend? You will kill him. In the sense that you will eventually become saturated. His ideas will no longer be interesting. The bedroom will no longer be interesting. Conversations will no longer be interesting. And, hello, Michelle. And it's really not your fault or his fault. It's just the way things work. We try our very best to keep things alive. But eventually things begin to hemorrhage. You try to breathe some life into them. It may work for a little bit, but then you'll be disappointed. Unless, of course, you have children. And unless you belong to a big family and walking away from the relationship may cause a good amount of shame and guilt, then you'll stay. And then you'll distract yourself with your children and with your life. That's Dante. Yes. It's okay.
I just wanted to comment. I think love, it shouldn't be the main thing in a relationship because it will be brittle sometimes. That's why I think friendship and companionship, especially from like the types you're speaking about when love is kind of not there anymore, is so important in a relationship for it to like come back together.
You should always marry a stranger and then get to know them for the next 20 years. The truth is, once you get to know anything too well, you'll kind of just be bored. Anyone else before we, speaking in tongues, I suppose we'll talk about it tonight in some shape or form. Anyone else? Kendra?
We talk about taking ourselves too seriously.
Well, it depends what it is what your aim is. You know, some people have, I had a student some years ago, he had a falling out with his father, and his father wanted to repair the relationship. And so one of the things that he did was he bought a used car, and his son enjoyed working with engines. And for the next 2 years, the father and the son got together and worked on this car. Eventually, he got the car, inherited the car, and it made their relationship really, really strong, really, really strong. So when you realize that something about certain parts of your life is broken, it's good to take it seriously. The casual parts of life, it's never to your advantage to take them seriously, but then the problem is, what is valuable to you? If the things that you value are cheap and superficial, then you have no choice but to take them seriously, but eventually come to realize later on with a good amount of regrets. I mean, as you age, that's what happens. You know, you don't have children, but I will tell you this much, that they will take toys very seriously. They will force you into Target. They will force you to In-N-Out. That's their toy. That's what they desire. And they are one with their desire. The desire breeds an image into them. And so what happens is they cry, they scream, they turn your life upside down. And then after 10, 15, 20 minutes playing with the toy, they just toss it, break it, trash it. And then they go to their next project. And I think adults are very much the same. You know, it may be that we're not playing with Spider-Man toys, for example, but we have different toys we play with. We have boyfriends and we have girlfriends. We take education somewhat seriously. We take most of our pursuits and ambitions seriously. I think the sort of things that we've been talking about in this class, such as time, such as age, such as the things you should do that does not eventually create a good amount of regret, serious losses, I think it's important to take yourself very, very seriously. Also because life is there to devour you. Life has no mercy on you. You know, I think casual people have a tendency of kind of just getting brutalized over time. And no one knows this until time passes and you realize. You know, and by the time you realize that you need to take yourself seriously, you have a good amount of trauma and trash inside you that need to be trashed. Someone needs to come inside you, yank them out and throw them. But it won't be too easy because by then you're too attached to them, you have a history with them, identity with them, so you should take yourself very, very, very seriously, especially as a woman. First, unlike a man, you have a biological clock. At a certain point in your life, your body demands babies. You're condemned. It could be a good condemnation, it could be a bad one. I don't really know. All I know is that there comes a certain point to every woman's life. And I'm not going to talk about those who can't, but for the most part, you know, there is a gift that you have. It could be a curse, I don't really know. That depends on how you view children, having children, raising them in a culture such as this, or perhaps any culture. That since your body is going to demand, and then psychologically you'll also be in a bind, you also want children, you want a family, then the question is, well, what sort of a man would you want? That depends on how you see yourself, how much you value yourself, your body, your time, your energy, how much you want to invest, you know, in the relationship. It all depends how seriously you take yourself. Should you take yourself, your body, sex, relationships, all those things casually? Should you just say partying is great, I like to have fun, so your definition of pleasure and fun, they're a little superficial, you know, then there's a good chance that you'll be consumed by that particular desire for a long, long, long time. And then one day you'll wake up, you'll be 27, 28, maybe a bit older, and you look around you, and your life will be somewhat like Job's in the Old Testament, which is there is nothing left. Your children are gone, your parents are gone, you have no property, animals are dead. You look at yourself, you're old, you're sick, you know, in some shape or form. So given that you have a time clock as a woman, and your body and your psyche will make some demands on you, it's best to prepare for that time now. Figure out what sort of a person you want in your life. Define for yourself what is beneficial in regards to pleasure. Go back to the hedonists, the Greek philosophers, some of them, that we have no choice but to be wired to pursue pleasure. The problem is You can have 10 minutes of fun and 50 years of misery. And you have to know what kind of pleasures will yield good fruits. So yeah, if you look at, for example, the dialogues of Plato, it's about 2,000-3,000 pages. Socrates never laughs. He doesn't find human existence funny. There is nothing to laugh about. Dante is the same way. He doesn't tell jokes. You look at Jesus, you look at Moses in the Old and the New Testament, and what you realize is that not once do they laugh. And there's a reason. Our time is short. It's something we should have talked about last night, but we didn't. One of the most important, I think, component in Confucianism is that given that human existence is so short and our pursuits can kind of create some very unsavory results, unpleasant results. It's kind of like playing chess. Every move has a consequence. Consider yourself for a moment. You walked into my class some 10 years ago. You could have been a dancer, you could have gone into the tech field. Right now, you would have been hired at somewhere in Silicon Valley making about $200,000. But you had this desire for ideas. That desire became consuming, and then you went and did philosophy and humanities. You make about $20,000 a year, not sufficient to make a life. And that's the consequences of some of the desires and ambitions and pursuits. But if you were to kind of compare yourself, a Kendra who's making 30,000 versus a Kendra making 200,000, you may find joy and comfort in some of the sayings in the New Testament by Jesus Christ. Kendra does not live by bread alone. She has some food in the fridge. She has a shelter. She has learned to be content. She reads. She stays home and she has fun. Once in a while, she comes to my house. We sit, we have some food, we talk, and that's good. So, when I was doing my PhD, there was a woman, she was from Burma. She was in her 80s and she was still teaching. She had decided to become a nun, and her parents were very, very upset with her. Burma is a poor country. It's a country that's always in a war. And so they wanted something better for her daughter, for their daughter. Her brothers were doctors. Her sisters were doctors. There were 9 altogether. But she just wanted to be a nun, And then what she told us one day in the class was that one day she receives a call. They had a conference call, all the siblings, and they were very envious of the fact that she's become a nun and the rest of them are stuck in this rat race, So what may yield pleasure now may become a place of sorrow tomorrow, or what creates some pain now may be a place of joy tomorrow. No one knows. It's really a shot in the dark. But as far as your question, take yourself very, very, very seriously. Add to the fact that, again, you are a woman. Men are visual creatures. If you choose the wrong things, you'll eventually have wrinkles. No one likes wrinkles. It's not fair, it's not just, but if there is someone younger, more attractive, you'll probably go into the footnotes. They'll choose the person who's more attractive. So before that time comes, Anyone else? By the way, no offense to those of you in this class who have wrinkles. It's not. Yes? You have wrinkles?
I feel like at the end of the day, you just gotta love yourself. I feel like everybody is beautiful in their own way.
No. Everybody's ugly.
No.
Yes, just look at Oakland. Look at the culture of Oakland. It does not create paradise.
If you have good self-esteem, about yourself, some people just say other people ugly because they don't.
You need to have a very, very, very low self-esteem. Very low self-esteem.
No.
Well, if you think that you know a lot of things about love and relationships, if you have a good amount of like confidence, go into one. Invest all of who and what you are into it, and then get burnt a couple years later. See what happens when you have a high self-esteem, when you have absolutely zero knowledge about things? It'll come back to bite you. Ha! Anyone else? But I know it's what we like to say these days. Everybody's beautiful. You're all equal. Love yourself. Yes. I too have watched Dr. Phil and Oprah Winfrey. Anyone else? Yeah.
Just a guest. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to ask questions.
You're a guest?
Yeah.
Yes.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
What do you consider is serious or not serious?
Serious is something that I say it's serious.
That's kind of the answer I was expecting.
Yes. Are you going to school? Did you graduate?
Yeah.
From what?
Engineering.
So you have your bachelor's?
Yeah.
You have your master's?
Yeah.
Good, then you're fine. How are your parents?
Great.
Do you keep in touch with them? You give them money? That's a bad thing to do. You buy them groceries?
Yeah.
There you go. You live with them?
No.
Why? Free laundry, free food, free room? Where are your parents from?
Both from the Philippines.
Oh, so you are familiar with Manny Pacquiao.
Sure. Only because I'm Filipino.
Manny Pacquiao. You should be proud. You know, what's your name?
Joseph.
Joseph? No. You know, Joseph, Iran is considered to be a third world. It's very poor, despite the resources. And it's poor because of the West.
Great.
Once in a while, Iran has a soccer game with America. Sometimes with England, sometimes with France. Sometimes it's just one of these Western countries. But it's not about soccer. It's the only tool that the Persians have to conquer the West, playing soccer. It's more than soccer. It's politics. It's religion. It's pride. Manny Pacquiao, it's more than boxing. Anyone else? Andrew.
Talk about anger.
Yeah, we can talk about anger because there's a lot of things to be angry about, and you have good reasons to be angry. So before we talk about anger and how anger comes about, because it does have a history. As I've mentioned many times, when a feeling blossoms into an emotion, it means that every emotion has a history behind it. And if you want to know how to remove anger, you need to understand the narratives that have come about to produce such an emotion that now lives inside your psyche. You know, if we go back to soccer and the West and Iran, why is it that the Persians get so excited and so terrified at the same time when, for example, Iran plays America? You know, we get really, really upset, depressed when Iran loses to America. But we get really excited when Iran wins because there's a history involved. And that history, at least for America, goes all the way back to the 1950s. And all the awful things that the CIA has done. You know. Now, you know, for 1,000 years in the West, beginning with around the 3rd century when Christianity became the dominant religion in the West. You knew exactly who you are. And remember what we talked about. Without guidance, without a GPS, your life is a complete mess. You know, you may have a boyfriend or a girlfriend that you hate, but you know that when you go home, what's waiting for you. You know, if on the other hand you're single and you're driving home somewhat sad, knowing that no one's going to be there, you kind of say, I'm going home to what exactly? Am I just going to look at the 4 corners of my room? Am I again going to watch TV? Okay. Now, for 1,000 years, you know what sort of a human animal you were. You were once in the Garden of Eden. Your forefathers did something nasty. You came down here. You had wings. Those wings were clipped. And life down here is never meant to produce any amount of happiness for you. You're not here to be happy. For 1,000 years, life was viewed as a vale of tears. This is a place of sorrow. زمن بشنوی پیر آموزگار مکن تکه بر گردش روزگار که این منزل درد و جای غم است در این دامگه شادمانی کم است. This is a place that works you to death and in the end gives you nothing. Okay. And so there was a salvation theory that the Catholic Church had the key to your soul. I'm not going to talk about the indulgence around the 14th, 15th century or so. You know, are you a man or a woman? You pull down your pants and they'll tell you. Things are not fluid. Do you have sex before marriage? No. Do you fear God? Absolutely. If you want to have pleasures, are you going to do it in open? No. If an instructor comes to class and asks how many of you watch porn, no hand goes up. There is an element of shame and fear. You don't talk back to your parents. You don't move out of your parents. Whatever you make, you give to your parents. That's how life works. Okay? And then Galileo comes about. And remember, you have to go back to Genesis. Genesis is everything down here is made for us. Earth is made for us. Animals are made for us. The forest is made for us. We have dominion over everything. That's a tremendous amount of power. Why? Because of all the created entities out there, you have the image of God. Nothing else does. Human beings are unique, special. They are loved by God. But they have been expelled. And they will have to do whatever they possibly can to make sure that God is not pissed off at them. Okay. Galileo comes about and says, that's actually not true. The earth is not the center of the universe. The sun does not revolve around the earth. It's actually us, a speck of dust in the middle of nowhere. Do you know what that does? Imagine that you've been married for 50 years. And all of a sudden you realize that your wife or your husband has been dating this person for the past 90 years. You thought you were special. You thought you were interesting. But all of a sudden you realize you're just secondhand. How's that going to make you feel? How are you going to define your marriage? How are you going to define your relationship? So that's the first blow to the human psyche. Galileo coming forth and saying, no, we're not really that special. Then a few years later comes this man named Charles Darwin. We don't really need to have God around at all. Put a bag of potatoes under your bed, and you will see exactly what's going to happen after a few weeks. It will turn into mush. It'll turn into a living organism that'll give birth to flies. Was God involved? No. Every organism has this intelligence in it. I mean, watch, for example, El Capitan Yosemite. How could something like a tree grow right in the middle of this rock? It makes no sense. But that's what living organisms do. Everything fights to survive, and everything will find a way to grow. You don't need God. Organisms have an intelligence on the inside, and its function is only one thing: fight to survive. What the hell do you do with that? If you were to define your anger as a living organism, you want to get rid of it. It's a living organism. It will fight to stay. You need to be 10 times more cunning, more deceptive, more creative, more insightful to get rid of this anger. It won't go away. It has a history inside you. It guides you. It guides certain narratives. It gives you identity. And now you what? You want to get rid of it? And you think what? By listening to Deepak Chopra or Eckhart Tolle or Jordan Peterson, you're simply going to walk away? No. And that is Charles Darwin. Should you believe in God? Get rid of it. Now, because we are wired to survive, we are profoundly resilient. We will do whatever we can to survive. If any of you in this class have ever had dreams about falling from a cliff or a building, you will never see yourself in the dream actually fall to the ground and die. You will always wake up. Now that's the second blow. First, we're not at the center of any goddamn thing out there. Second, you don't need God around to have life all of a sudden emerge. It just happens. And third, there is a part of you that you will never have access to. That's Sigmund Freud. You will never get to know who you are. All this yoga shops in Berkeley, in Oakland, all this new age garbage that's around, all the stuff we've talked about the past 5 weeks, Hinduism, get to know yourself, Buddhism, get to know yourself. It may work for India, because India didn't have Charles Darwin. India didn't have a Sigmund Freud. India did not have a Galileo. India and Indians live by myths, magic. They're not secular. They didn't go through industrial revolution. Now, you try all sorts of things to figure out who you are, what you are. You know, what are you supposed to do with the next few days that you're around? You know, and it's confusing. I mean, imagine you want to find Meikade. It's a Persian restaurant in San Francisco. You know the name. It's called Meikade. Put your cell phone at the house and just drive and find where Meikade is. What's going to happen when after 2-3 hours of asking people, looking for this place, you won't find it? Well, you're going to be frustrated. Your confidence is going to go away. Eventually, you're going to become angry. You want to figure out what makes you happy. You want to figure out how you can be content. You want to figure out how to love. You want to figure out how to put the marriage back together. You and I want to figure out what the hell we ought to do with the short few hours that we're here. We never are successful. Which means what? Well, you'll be angry. Eventually, you'll be a little agitated. Then you'll be a little confused. Then you'll be frustrated. Then you'll be profoundly annoyed. Then you'll be very angry. And God forbid if anger turns into violence or rage. Then you're just poison to yourself and everybody else around you. You have every right to be angry. Because we are born in darkness and we have no idea where we're going. For those of you in this class who have, I don't know if it's posted or not, Thomas Cole had this painting It's a set of paintings called Voyage of Life. The only, I think, true moments of joy that you and I have is from maybe the age, if you're healthy, you got relatively decent parents, from the age maybe 0 to about maybe 4 or 5. You can just laugh innocently. You can break things without knowing. And people see how innocent and naive and stupid you are as a child. So they just say, honey, it's okay, just don't do that again. Once something about you awakens, once society or parents impose upon you responsibilities that you're eventually going to go into the social world, behave yourself, otherwise society will just chew and spit you out. You realize now you have to carry this burden on your shoulder. You have to be an adult at the age of 6. And then you won't be laughing as much. And that's the first painting of Thomas Cole, that you're a kid, you're naked, you have no shame, you just laugh, you're on a tiny little raft, the waters are calm, as they should be. Inside the boat, it's lush, there's an angel standing, protects you. There is a sand hour clock, but you're not paying attention to it because you're just having a good time. But just in case you were to look behind you, you would realize that you're coming out of this dark cave. Why is it dark? Well, you're a kid, you don't really care. You don't ask those questions. Your frontal lobe is not yet developed to be reflective like that. If you look above, you realize, well, the cave is rocky. There are no living things on it. There is one dead tree and that's broken. The sky is gloomy. And that's what innocence does. That's what love does to some extent. It blinds you to the realities of life. And then, of course, you enter this place called youth. All of us in this class. We have hopes, you have dreams. Society has given you advertisements. You can be this and you can be that. Oh yeah, go into a relationship, fall in love, you can make it. You're exempt. The human condition does not apply to you. You're intelligent, love yourself. Be confident. Even though you're a piece of shit, haven't done anything in your life. And these are the advertisements, And you're so arrogant when you're young that this angel that's used to be on your boat, now you kick the angel out. And the angel pleads, let me stay. Just in case you need me, I can actually help you. Now, buzz off. Now, because you're so consumed by the dreams and the hopes that you have, and remember, dreams and hopes always live in the future, always. Which means that what sits in front of you, you won't be able to see. Because you're far too drunk by the dreams that live inside you. And the dreams are symbolic of this temple that lives somewhere out there. Every one of us have it. I'm going to get married, beautiful temple. I'm going to have children, another beautiful temple. I'm going to get my master's, then yes, I'll be categorized as successful. All dreams. But the road is windy, the river is, the waters are. And if you look close attention to the second painting, there is this desert. This is where you are, this is the dream, and this is the desert. Life is just a desert. You will never reach your dreams. It doesn't mean that if you have a dream that you want to get your master's degree, that you won't get it. You will get your master's, and you will be happy for a couple of hours. But then the desert will return. Now what? Then you do interviews. Then you get a job. Now you have another dream. I'm making all this money. I can buy a house. You do buy a house. But you say, well, I need to get into a relationship. Now what? And so at every stage you realize you have a dream, you fulfill it, and then the desert appears. And then there comes this point called manhood. That's the third painting. Up to this point you had relative control over your life. You have no power over anything now. Your wife looks at you and says, I'm leaving you. You imagine that you're going to have an A in the class, you end up with a D. All of a sudden, you have a message on your phone, mom died. You go for a routine checkup, diagnosed with cancer. You're driving the highway, there's a shooting. A car rams into you. And life delivers to us all these moments where you lose power, you lose control, and you realize how insignificant you really are. And life is like Godzilla. It's there to devour every part of you, inside and out. And you struggle. And for the first time, if you look at the painting closely, this young man begins to pray, something he's never done in the previous two paintings. He prays because he's broken. He prays because he has no power. He prays because the waters are far too rough. He prays because in pain there is no one, you're all alone. Like Dante, in the middle of my years, like 30, 40, you would hope that you have your life together, but you find yourself completely lost. And then the fourth painting is your salvation. You're old now. All you do is you sit and you wait for death. And that in itself is profoundly courageous, to be ready for your life to end. And hopefully by the time you get to the fourth painting, you know a thing or two about being an infant, being very, very young, being a child. That every child has a toy. Then you get to the second painting and you say to yourself as an old man, I also know the anatomy of dreams, how they're made, what they do. Then you get to the third painting. Despite all of that, life will break you. As Freud would say, the slings and arrows of life is exempt to no one. We all will suffer. Very much like the Buddha. The Buddha was just a bit more eloquent. Okay. So, given all of that, you should never trust anyone who tells you be passive, be calm. You should be very angry. The thing is then, how do you want to express the anger? Well, Khalil Gibran expresses anger by writing poetry. You know, the Buddha expresses anger by just coming out and saying, you know, life is just suffering. It's tough. And if you want to know why it's tough, go study life. You can't just go around beating up people. It doesn't work that way. I mean, look at the way Mike Tyson speaks now at the age of like 50-some, as opposed to when he was 20. In 20, he was just angry, despite having millions of dollars. His language was trash. His mentality was trash. Now at the age of 50, man, this is an eloquent human being. He understands a few things. But you have every right to be angry. You just need to express the anger the right way. You know, sometimes you have expectations, you make plans, things don't work out, you're angry. And it's because we're all limited in knowledge, in experience, in perspective. There are some blind spots that all of us have. You know, it's kind of like driving. Always kind of look behind you to make sure that if you're changing lanes, there's no car. You know, there are these moments where life delivers certain events that just push you all over the place. Going back to kind of the spirit of our conversations the past few weeks of this class, I would say the following. You know, you have a child, your child misbehaves, you scream, you reprimand your child in some shape or form. They're wounded on the inside, they go somewhere, they sit and cry. You've made them angry. Then what you do after a few minutes, you go to them and you say, let's go to Safeway, steal a bucket of ice cream. Not buy, steal. And all of a sudden says, yeah, that sounds fun. And what you realize is that someone very close to you that you care for and you love misbehaved. In a very educated way, you reprimanded the kid. You broke him. But you didn't walk away. After a few minutes, you went to him, put him in the car, went to Safeway, and you guys had ice cream. It's always, always your advantage to be made angry by a teacher. But if the relationship is not intimate, if it's not solid, the moment a teacher makes you angry, you'll just walk away and never come back. Because you have in your imagination that teachers are supposed to be compassionate, forgiving, understanding. That's not the way it works. The teacher will piss you off. They will break you. But because of the intimacy and because of the history, they will pull you back and they will kind of support you and the relationship will continue. And eventually they'll tell you why you were angry, why this was done. If I was to kind of put your question in a more colorful way, I would say the following. Imagine that your parents, the moment you're born, they keep telling you, life is Mike Tyson, life is Mike Tyson, life is Mike Tyson. And you have to eventually go into the ring and fight Mike Tyson. Well, what are you going to do? Well, knowing eventually that you have to face this man, well, you start your training from a very, very young age. Take yourself very seriously. Take the training seriously. Because once you get into life, it's going to demolish you. And you need tools. You need to be trained physically, emotionally, intellectually, and if you want, spiritually, to survive life. Otherwise, you'll be going to therapy. You'll do drugs. You'll do alcohol. You'll do porn.
Is it necessary?
What? Yeah, it's necessary. Yeah.
Well, what do we have to look forward to?
Nothing. Yeah, what you have to look forward to is being educated.
Is there some good left?
Yeah, being educated, that's fun.
It's not.
Yeah, it is.
No, it's not.
Yeah, it is.
It's a target. Especially you have to lay it all out in a canvas of plethora and say, this is my credentials, this is what I have, and this is what I did. Was there anything left in any benefit, to support this cause? And if there's no sponsorship, right? Any logic of sponsorship, you give us something to look forward to. Is there any good in this? I mean, it's great to know, it's great to absorb, but I mean, other than money.
Yeah, I mean, it's great that you're in love and you want to get married. There's nothing wrong with that. It's good to have that desire, as long as you know there will come a time where you will look at your companion and feel nothing. And then you won't walk away. You just are ready for that day. That's your training ground. Allahu Akbar. Anyone else? Michelle. Yeah, Michelle.
Can you talk about other people, like you removing yourself from people who are toxic, but they still keep on attaching themselves somehow to you?
You know, American History X, it's a movie. I'm sure you've maybe not, but if you haven't seen the movie, watch it. It's really good. What happens is, this guy has a very intimate relationship with the White Brotherhood clan. Eventually, he gets caught because he killed someone, a black guy. He ends up in prison. The white guy does. In prison, he assumes that white people are his friends, but one day when he's showering, he comes to realize they're not really his friends. They're his friends for a certain benefit. Then, eventually his best friend in prison becomes this young black kid, saves his life, and his perspective begins to change. He goes back home, and he finds out that his younger brother, who's about like 14 or 15, has joined, this White Brotherhood community. He can't get rid of the clan, but he can physically relocate He can take his brother and move somewhere else. Of course, he's not able to, and I think his brother dies eventually. The point I'm trying to make is cancer, despite being poison for the human body, it'll do what it can to survive. It camouflages itself as this friendly cell, and it deceives other cells, and the other cells invite the cancer cell, and before you know it, it spreads and you're dead with a good amount of pain. If you have a history with a group of people, just because you delete their number, it doesn't mean they're going to go away. They will keep harassing you and harassing you. If, of course, you have the will to refrain from picking up their call, texting them back, eventually they'll just give up. You have to, look, for anything to go away, you need to starve it. And that requires a good amount of knowledge, overcoming certain temptations. And it's difficult. What little I know about the AA center is that, because we had a car wash that was, across the street from it, initially, they assume that they can overcome this addiction because of self-love and confidence, all that. And they realize the power of alcohol is just far too great. It's too much. They go back into the world, despite their best efforts. And then they realize they really need to join a community, a clan, a cult that creates a support system for them, that every time they want to take up the bottle, they have a friend they can call. They have a sponsor they can reach out to. So if there are things in your life that are poisonous, whether they're emotional, intellectual, or physical, and since you're talking about physical human beings, and since every human being is a container of sort of advertisement, emotional, intellectual advertisement, then the only way out of that is just complete removal. You have to live in a gated community. It won't work otherwise. And by gated, I don't mean like physically. Mentally, you have to figure out who you want, who you don't want, what's good for you, what's bad for you, Yeah, Julian?
Kind of answered it.
Really? Anyone else? Sure? Yeah.
How do you start a religion?
How do you start what?
How do you start a religion?
A religion? I am not really quite sure, but I think some people just have, and I don't know how this talent or charisma or magnetism comes about. Some people have certain things about them, and then you would want to be around them. Brad Pitt is a good-looking guy. You want to be around him. But after a while, you realize that his looks are not enough. You want to make sure he speaks well as well. Once in a while, you find people who are relatively physically attractive, or they could be unattractive, but what transforms their unattractiveness into beauty is they think well. And then they can express their thinking well. And then that captivates you. You want to be around them. Before you know it, you have like 50 people following you. And then when you die, they're going to write a book about you and call it the Gospels. And a good amount of advertisement. Yeah. Did you want to create one? Well, good. TikTok it and then send it to me. Right, Paloma?